I think he's enjoying the ride. And people ask me that all the time. And Kyle and I have joked about it. He's always told me, Billy, I'm not going to be a lifer. Not like my dad, not like Lavelle. I'm not going to be a lifer. But he's got a program, Yogi, that is it's a well oiled machine.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I am your host, Yogi Roth. Thank you, as always, for joining us again. Here we are in week 5. We got a bunch of big games. Finally, it is all conference ball, and we talked to Bill Riley, yes, the voice of the Utah Utes, a good friend who now we call Professor Riley. All of that is coming up. With that, let's bring in Jim Thornby, co-founder of Y Option. Jim, it's been a hectic week of editing and producing for you. We had John Canzano on earlier this week. News broke literally as we hung up. What can you tell us about where we sit today, I guess, in Pac-12 realignment as we get into these games?
Yeah, I don't want to overcommit to this one because I don't want to play the same game. I don't want to play the same game twice. But what do we at here? This is Wednesday afternoon. The Pac-12 is currently at 7 teams, including the newly added Utah State. Where it goes from there, I don't know. What I can tell you is probably the people that work at the Pac-12, the Mountain West Conference, and even the American Conference are probably not sleeping great. Are probably just waiting for this whole thing to wrap up, because even the American put out their statement oh, we're all together. I mean, we've seen that happen before, and then things fall apart after the fact. So until things are final, I don't think anybody's sleeping good. And I have friends in all 3 conferences, so I feel for all of them, because I remember what it's like to go through that. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I think, look, we pride ourselves here at Y Option of being thoughtful through the lens of college football via the lens of the West Coast, right? So with that, we're talking about 2 leagues that are the West Coast and the American, who got a chance to be all across the country. Maybe it's in its own pocket, who knows? And I think the thing that bums me out about this and is also exciting about this is that this is the nature of college football. We have seen this over the course of years around realignment. Everybody isn't going to be happy with one another when it's all said and done. There's winners and losers. There's leagues that emerge. There's leagues that have to rebuild. We lived it with the Pac-12. The shuffling is only going to continue. The other part of the thing that is, to me, what I don't like is that it takes away from, we only have X amount of weeks of games, right? I get the timing is the timing, and it's a part of it. And I'm really excited for the Pac-12 in the rebuild, especially for Washington State and Oregon State, because by no fault of their own, they've been put in this position. But I'm excited to talk about the games. I know what drives the dialogue. The only thing I'll say to your friends and my friends in all 3 of those leagues is don't live and die by every tweet emotionally. I mean it.
I'm laughing because
you've done that.
You know that it's me.
I know. We have a thread.
I am Exhibit A in that conversation of living and dying by tweets by random accounts with three letters and 8 numbers or whatever like that, and going, oh, what's up?
Whose burner is that?
Yeah, which one is that? That's because trust me, Exhibit A right here.
Yeah. So that's it. That's our words of wisdom. Just sit tight. Enjoy your team's games. Enjoy the teams that are still in your league. And if they're departing and you're mad at them, okay, fine. You got a bunch of other teams you could cheer for. That's what I would just say. And then allow the news and the dust to settle. And I got a feeling it's not going to settle overnight. I think this last part of it is going to drag out a little while. So thankfully, we got games.
Yeah, and ironically, probably one of the best games of the weekend is Pac-12 current versus Pac-12 future.
Yeah, I wonder if both commissioners are going to be at this game. And of course, Gloria Nevarez, who is a good friend of ours, known her for decades, huge fan. And of course, Teresa Gold, who is also a really good friend and has been leading and guiding the charge along with the leaders at Washington State and Oregon State. So with that, we got that game. Top 25 Boise State. In my eyes, Wazoo should be a top 25 team. I get that
Right
they
behind
struggled
them.
a week ago.
Just
Yeah,
literally right behind them. They're
Right
they're 26th.
26. And what the hell is the top 25 anyway? Who even cares right now? But we do.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, I've talked to some national people this week that follow Y Option. I talked to one Heisman voter and said, because of your newsletter, he's now on my list in John Mateer, going up against a Heisman candidate, Nash Genty, right, at the running back position.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's two guys that need to be on your list right there. I mean, obviously, with Washington State, with them being undefeated, like that. I mean, in all reality, when you look at things and you look at, who wins the Heisman, last year, a little bit of an exception to that with Jaden Daniels and, LSU not having as good of a record as Washington or Oregon. And we can debate that one for hours or months or years. But I mean, when you look at it, an undefeated season is kind of the path for John Mateer to be in this conversation. And right now he belongs in it. And with Genty, Boise State has lost the game, but it was at Oregon and he balled out in that game. So there's no whether or not that he should be, he's going to be in the back end of that conversation because, Cam Ward, ironically, is probably at the top of the list right now with a couple of other players that are more East Coast, based. But these are two guys right now that I think are really two true sleepers in that Heisman race.
Okay, so we're calling our shot now that if those two guys find their way to New York City, we are getting the exclusive with both of those two, with Ben Arbuckle. We'll bring in a quarterback from San Jose State. We'll just have the whole gang back together in that QB room. And we'll do something really special for all of you. Okay, the Beavs, they're off this weekend. Interesting. To your point, they get Colorado State next weekend. Talk about the new look Pac-12. Just keeps rolling. Fresno State, UNLV. I want to have this conversation because it has gone all over social media. UNLV's, I guess we say former starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, current starting.
I would say, don't until he is actually not there, until they play a game and he is not there. Let's. Again, because I think this is what our whole point is going to be about, pumping the brakes here. But until they actually play a game and he's not there, let's let this all kind of play out. But it's been interesting because late Tuesday night, really late Tuesday night, he sends out a tweet that he's sitting out the rest of the season due to, quote, certain representations that were made to me which were not upheld after I enrolled. And so then basically all Wednesday morning, afternoon has now become the he said deal. So Sluka and his agent and his family are all saying, hey, we were told, we're going to give you $100,000 to come out here. The school's NIL is like, no, we never offered that. They made a payment of $3,000 and they were discussing another monthly payment of $3,000. Who knows what the truth is here, right now. I think that's what really needs to kind of filter out, because there was a lot of quick reaction when this news came out. Oh, he's quitting on this team, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I mean, if he actually was offered this and whatever, and then it doesn't materialize, he's really at the end of his college career. I mean, this is not someone, even though he's got the nickname in Vegas of Sluka Doncic, he is not someone who's going to go on to the next level and play in the NFL. This is the end of his football career. He's a grad transfer from Holy Cross. This is his basically last chance to do this. So if there were promises, whether or not these are in writing or what have you, which I think we're learning that always get everything in writing, but you can kind of understand, if you were and the way college football is now, this really is becoming a true job, with how everything has evolved in the NIL world. So if you have a job and someone says they're going to pay you X and then they don't pay you X, you're probably not going to work there anymore. So there's so many different angles to this, but until we really get to the bottom of what the true story is, it's hard to really put a blame on either one, or maybe there's blame on both. I mean, but again, it'll all kind of evolve.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, is what my initial gut said, Jim. I think a couple things that I believe to be true is that, one, financial chemistry in locker rooms is a real thing. I asked Ryan Day that this season. I've asked Lincoln Riley that over past seasons. Like, navigating that is a thing. And now coaches are allowed to communicate and connect to their collective. That was not the case a year ago. So where is the coaching staff in all of this too? That's who I want to hear from next, because you're allowed to dictate where funds go and you're aware of what funds are. That's a new part of the modern age in college football, at least to my understanding. That's one. Two, most quarterbacks are making $100,000. That's a fact, like even those that are inexperienced. Now, here is UNLV sitting in Las Vegas. I don't know what their collective is. Their entire collective might be $100,000. Like I've talked to teams that their entire collective is $50,000. Like I don't know that, and I don't want to pretend to know that. But I do know that a going rate for a talented quarterback in the transfer portal at minimal is right around that. So it begs the question: if that was agreed upon to verbally, in writing, what have you, something went awry. Because it's not as though they're 0-3 and he's been sacked 17 times and he's about to be beat out by a freshman. Like, he is the guy on a team having great success.
3-0 for the first time since 1984.
There you
since
go.
Randall Cunningham was there.
Love the drop. And their head coach is probably going to be on the short list of coaches who get another shot in major college football based on the success of last year's team, based on the early success of this year's team. This is what I'll urge people to do. And having written the book 5-Star QB alongside Joey Roberts, what these quarterbacks are going through, they're going through it for the first time. So you referenced job. I think it's fair to say that in the world of college football now. Yes, you have to go to class, but you also are paid for your services, right? Name, image, and likeness has become a version of get paid to go play. And I'm not breaking any news there. That's fundamentally what it is. But for a young man like Matthew Sloka, who's transferring from Holy Cross to UNLV and having early success, it's a whole new world for him. I don't know his representation. I don't know his family. I've never met Matthew. But I do believe that, having talked to hundreds of quarterbacks that have gone through this journey, everything is for the first time. And I would imagine after his early success, there are a lot of people talking to his agent and saying, hey, we really like this guy. Is there a world where he sits out and comes plays for us? Like, I wonder where the idea came from. Because if it's just about money, or if it's just about playing, like that, those are the questions that I would be asking. Like, when did the idea come into your mind? Like, hey, you're going to dip and sit for the rest of the season based on this NIL agreement? Because I would like to think that the various alumni in the greater Las Vegas community who have not seen this since Randall Cunningham could find $100,000 somewhere. There's a lot of places where there's a lot of money in Las Vegas if they wanted to make this thing happen. So there's a dramatic breakdown in communication. And what I don't want to do is pile on the quarterback. Not pile on the student athlete. I'm not going old school in that regard. I just don't want to pile on somebody going through an experience for the first time without knowing the dialogue that has been ongoing. Now, let me give you one more thought, because I've talked to a lot of people in college football about this over the course of the last 10 hours. To think that this is one of one, I think, would be naive. I think there are, and there will continue to be, players who will go to their coaching staff and say, hey, I've got a soft tissue injury. Hey, I don't know if I could play the rest of the season. Because someone was in their ear. I'm not saying that person is a street agent or that person is Gandhi. Right? It could be somewhere in the middle. But someone is saying to you, hey, there's an economic decision. The future of your football can continue, especially if you're in your final year of eligibility, that could be beneficial if you sit and don't play? And I think that's a fair conversation because I know it's happening. Is it happening with starting quarterbacks? Not to my knowledge. Is it happening with the backup strong safety? Yes. So that's just where I'm saying, like, let's have a little bit of empathy for everybody involved. Coaching staff probably blown away when your starting quarterback who's playing at Holy Cross a year ago said, no, I'm an undefeated team. I don't want to do it. And you know that a group of 5 has a chance to go to the CFP this year. Probably blown away if I'm in that staff room. But if you knew the agreement, you would have seen it coming. So I go back to the financial chemistry. So many unknowns, not ready to make a full judgment yet, but I will continue to pound the pavement to be thoughtful, Jim. So,
well, I mean, it's
there we go.
You speak of it not being one of one. I mean, it's not even one of one on the own team. I mean, their running back, Michael Allen. You know, he just transferred in from NC State this offseason. He's saying that he is now also going to, you know, sit out the rest of the season and go in the portal. But then he put out a tweet clarifying that this has nothing to do with anything NIL. This is only about on-field opportunities. So to that point, I mean, we're going into a new world of college football. I mean, you thought realignment was a big change, and it obviously is. These things are just more and more of these things where, you know, the unintended consequences of change in college football were things that people didn't think about, and they'd be like, oh, like that's a thing.
Okay, so let's just throw this one out there, and for the listeners, just ponder this thought. You know, none of us, I think, are fans of like dominant non-conference wins by teams that are dramatically better than their opponent, especially in this era where most Group of 5 rosters are being rated by Power 5 rosters, if you want to just be simple about it in that fact. Is there a world, right? Because we used to ask, hey, coach, you're going to play Jim Thornby, the true freshman, in the 4th game this week, heading into week 4 or week 5? Now we're going to be asking, are you playing the senior Jim Thornby today? Or do you have any players that are opting out? So my question is that if I'm a head coach and I'm an athletic director, I might want to play some games where I know I could play a lot of guys early. So then I don't have this issue. Because if I'm all of a sudden playing dramatically competitive games in the first month of the season, half of my roster knows really quick who's playing and who's not. And I only say that to spin it to next year, right? If it goes through, which I hope it doesn't, but if it goes through and walk-ons are basically eliminated, and you could have a roster up to 104, 106, whatever it is, of full scholarship players, what do you think 30 of them are going to do come week 5? What do you think? They're going to say, hey, coach, I want to save my year. Like, it's just going to be unintended consequences. And I understand why and around rev sharing. We didn't plan on going there today. We got Bill Riley coming up, presented by our founding partner, 76. But, hey, it's thoughtful dialogue. I haven't heard other people diving into it like this, so I'm glad that we are, Jim.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Sorry, so let's get back on the rails.
Yeah, the first thing I was gonna say is, you know, when you're constructing a roster and you have a bunch of Jim Thornbys on your team, you're already on shaky ground.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, don't worry. He's not even gonna make a comment. All right, let's rip through these games. I'm gonna lay out a couple. Tell me what stands out to you. Let's go to the Big Ten. Oregon comes to UCLA, 8 p.m. No jokes around that, Jim. It's what it is. It's an 8 p.m. game. We all know the deal around that. Dylan Gabriel is likely to pass Timmy Chang and Bo Nix on the total yards list by the NCAA. Cannot wait to watch every snap of that. Wisconsin comes to SC without their starting quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke. SC coming off a heartbreaking loss we talked about earlier in the week. Their first ever home Big Ten game. It is a sellout, folks. It is a sellout at the Collie. There'll be a lot of Cardinal. Curious how much red, right, when we're talking about Wisconsin. UW on a Friday goes to Rutgers. I think these are two teams that could be competing to be a top 25 team, especially Rutgers, what they did against Virginia Tech. They were dominant. Then they had to make a comeback and won late a week ago. And Ohio State goes to Michigan State and Jonathan Smith. Illinois, Penn State, sneaky game of the week, in my opinion. Minnesota goes to Michigan. I got Minnesota in 2 weeks against SC, so I'll be all over that one. In Maryland at Indiana. That'll be a fun matchup. But of those, from the lens of the West Coast, what stands out to you?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned about how much, that Wisconsin red you'll see there. I mean, I lived in LA from 99 to '08, and those few times that Wisconsin was in the Rose Bowl during those years,
Oh,
I mean,
Barry Alvarez.
that city was red. So, I mean, I think I think you can definitely expect to be some Badger fans there, even if they're, feeling a little down about their quarterback being out for the year. And it's, this is going to be the second straight week that USC is going to get a team with quarterback issues there. But I thought USC looked really good last week. What was Lincoln's quote in practice after practice the other day? He said 95% of the defensive snaps last week were really good.
I agree.
And that was, just those couple plays. I mean, they coming into that game last week, Michigan was one of 7 teams, was the stat, that did not have a play in all of college football, in all of FBS college football. It was one of 7 teams that didn't have a play of 40 plus yards. And then they had 2 40 plus yard touchdowns in the first half. And you're like, oh man, they're in trouble. But man, they really tightened things up in that second half. Hats off to D'Anton Lynn for what they did in that second half. And it was one play that made the difference. Because it didn't seem like without that 60 plus yard run that Michigan had it going enough to get a sustained drive that would take them all the way down the field. They needed that explosive play to be able to get in the game. So that, obviously I think SC is going to be, looked upon as a clear favorite to win this game. But also one more thing, hats off to Miller Moss. I mean, he's been awesome so far this year. Obviously in that Michigan game, he was on his back most of that game. But so far this year, 65% completion percentage, 5-1 touchdowns, almost 300 yards a game. But he has really stepped up and done what was expected. I wouldn't even say expected. He has probably surpassed what people have expected out of him so far this year.
Yeah. Other people's expectations, he surpassed. His own probably hasn't met, knowing him. Take a listen. Yeah. We had a great conversation with him prior to the season at Y Option in the archives. Jim, good tip of the cap to D'Anton Lynn. And if you want a new cap like the one Jim is wearing, just go to yoption.com, baby. Get some of that merch. Quick little note on all those games. I want to see Oregon coming off a bye week. We just saw Ohio State coming off a bye week. I want to see UCLA continue to grow. I think they're better than their record is. What they did against LSU is really impressive. They just got to find a way to protect the passer in this game, especially against those 2D tackles, transfer D tackles for the Ducks. They are real. Next one I'm going to go to, you referenced SC. Of course, I want to see what the offensive line looks like. I'll be calling their game in the following week. Ohio State, Michigan, though, there's something intriguing to that. Michigan State's going to come out to Eugene, and then Ohio State's going to follow Michigan State out to Eugene. I'm looking forward to watching this game. Ohio State hasn't played anybody yet. It's kind of been NFL preseason mode, but they have drilled people. They are real, legit, in my opinion. But we know Jonathan Smith is going to be a tough out. He always is. It was penalties the first 3 weeks. It was 4 turnovers last week. How does Aiden Childs do on his biggest stage as a young quarterback? We will find out. All right, let's go to the Big 12.
Before you move on real fast, your note about Jonathan Smith, he was 7 in his time at Oregon State. 7 times he faced the top 10 team. 3 and 4. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
And one of them was like Ohio State in year 1, probably, and they lost like 73-3 or something.
77-31.
Yeah,
that was.
They took the lead though, didn't they? Score a touchdown right off the bat.
I think you're right.
It was Pierce down the left sideline.
I think you're right. That was like an Artavis Pierce, right?
Yeah, I think so. I
think that was. I think you're right, but yeah, that was in year 1. But after that, he knows a thing or two about an upset. And obviously, Oregon State has always known a thing or two about an upset, even though now this is a different school. So it's kind of funny how this will. We'll see if this can carry on.
I love that. All right, so we got Bill Riley coming on to talk in depth about Utah. Utah fans, we hear you. We love you. We shut up for you this week. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode. But Jim, you are our de facto Arizona guru. Give us one thought about Arizona coming off their bye week, heading into what is commonly referred to as Sack Lake City on Saturday night.
Well, de facto, because I read pretty much everything that the writers out of Tucson write. So, but I mean, there's so much to clean up in that bye week. You look at, third downs. The last 2 weeks, Arizona 5 of 24 on third down after being 8 of 12 in the season opener. 28 penalties so far this season, at least 9 penalties in every game. The one thing that I thought was pretty interesting. So the last 2 weeks, they've had under 7 pass yards per attempt in each of those games. That only happened once in the final 8 games last year. In the season opener, I mean, we saw T-Mac go crazy, 13.6 yards per pass in that season opener. So can they get a more sustained offense going? The one thing I read all preseason from everybody in the Tucson media, it seems like they still are surprised that it hasn't been this way, was that they would get the tight end the ball more in this offense. Apparently Keon Burnett, whose dad Chester played when I was a student back in the day there at Arizona, he's been banged up, even though he was kind of one of those guys in the fall camp that really kind of showed out. He's another one of the Juice County guys. He actually, I mean, other than T-Mac, he was probably the next highest recruit out of that level. He was originally, I think, going to go to SC. And then as everything kind of coalesced around that group with Fafita and Jacob Manu, and they all wound up coming together. But that's what I want to see, like how much, because it seems like there's almost a high DEFCON level of panic in Tucson right now. And, they're coming off a 10-win season. We don't get a lot of those in Tucson. So there is that expectation level. So the fans are like, oh, we think that we're, all these guys that came back, we should have another one of those seasons. But, it doesn't, just because you have the same players, you got to give a new coaching staff time to gel with those guys. But now we've had 3 games. We've had the bye week. It's time to do it.
So here's a big thing that I'm on, and I would, when I'm watching this game, or if you're watching this game, this is what I'd recommend people take their eyes to. One is, what do you do best, right? What matters most around your program? For Arizona, to your point, we don't know yet. We don't know what they do best, and we don't know what is valued the most, because we've seen inconsistent play. What I think they do best is the obvious, right? Noah, T-Mac, passing game, get the ball out quick. Well, what does Utah do best? They're an aggressive defense. They win at the line of scrimmage, and they are not afraid to bring pressure. I'm having flashbacks. I'm swearing. Jaden Daniels of Arizona State dropping back, and here comes defensive lineman Leki Fotu. Here comes linebacker Devin Lloyd, and here comes safety Julian Blackman. Boom, 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 3 guys right up the middle, right up the AB gap, right over the center. I just think that's what's going to happen on Saturday night. You're going to see an extremely aggressive Utah defense at home try to leverage the energy of that crowd, which we know it is a thing. It can swallow you. And on the other side, they're going to have to protect, maybe max protect, keep one of those tight ends in protection as you reference, have those backs bow up against those blitzers, and they're going to have to feed T-Mac. They just are. Utah historically will not try to just take away a guy all game long. They play pretty straight up, a version of man coverage. They want to beat you up at the line of scrimmage. They want to counter on their guys. Do they have answers if T-Mac starts going off? Of course. Will they double him in the red zone? I would anticipate. Third down, will they have a set of eyes on him? 100%. But ultimately, in early downs, you've got to go and do what you do best. And I think early on in this season, the challenge is, can you protect and hold up everywhere on that offensive line against an aggressive scheme like they're going to see against Utah and get it to your playmakers? I think they need to do that early in this ball game. If they do, we're going to have a hell of a game. If they can't, it's going to be a tough night for the Wildcats. And I'm excited to see how they do coming off that bye week, Jim. So much more than that.
I was going to say, it's interesting too, because one of the other games in the conference, I won't go in depth on this one by any stretch, but Oklahoma State and Kansas State are playing each other this week. So already one of those teams is going to have 2 losses. So there's opportunity here for Arizona, and obviously for opportunity for Utah. And we'll talk a lot more about Utah, with Bill coming up later. But this will be an interesting weekend in the Big 12 with those two games and how everything kind of shakes out.
Yeah, and just a friendly reminder, Arizona doesn't have a loss in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was a Big 12 team, but it was
a non-conference conference game.
Yeah, of course. Why not? Colorado at UCF. I'll actually be glued to this one. Who wasn't glued to everything Colorado? We talked about that earlier. UCF's sneaky good. UCF is sneaky good. What is Colorado like on the road? How do they handle what is a really cool environment in Orlando? See what happens if they could protect. They've struggled there really since Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, became the head coach. They're going to have to clean that up if they want to get a win against UCF and be taken as a real threat in that league. I think it's a truth teller weekend for Colorado on the road.
Yeah, I mean UCF leads the nation in rushing, and Colorado top 5 in passing. So it'll definitely be a clash of styles between the two. The Colorado team actually headed out to Orlando on Wednesday because of there's a potential hurricane coming through Orlando. It seems like not to play the weather guy, but it seems like the worst of that will happen on Thursday. So they were trying to leave to get ahead of that. And then hopefully, hopefully there's not much damage from all that. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact that might have on the game on Saturday. If it's still windy and rainy or whatever, that might play a little bit more into UCF's hands. But again, we'll see. I'm definitely not a meteorologist, so.
No, and what's interesting about that is like A, it's a focus thing when you do leave that early. B, they're going back to Florida. We know where Coach Prime's from, the origin. I'll be curious to know like if that's a thing or if it's a true business trip. So I'm sure a lot that you can check out on YouTube and see what the Colorado Buffaloes are doing. They do a great job of showing whatever they do want to show from the lens of the Buffs. All right, let's go to the ACC. Stanford. I love it. Cards. There was a great social media something that came out there. It was like it was kind of like an analogy of Stanford and the ACC and just how like they were going to be the champs. and I love it, man. I love it. You should. I think Troy Taylor was our headset hero, coach of the week for Y Option in our awards presented by our founding partner 76 this past weekend. Now they go to face a team in Clemson. We were around Cade Klubnik this summer. He was an Elite 11 counselor. Clemson's playing their best ball in years right now, especially in the throw game. Stanford's got to come out, control the clock, and can they only allow, let's say they get the ball, allow Clemson to have a possession in the first quarter. They've got to limit possessions, and they've got to, in my opinion, take time off clock. Tick, 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 tick. You feed Alec Eilmanor, I think a really one of those guys that will just climb the draft boards as the season ends and continues to progress. It would be Stanford's. It might be one of their greatest wins in my lifetime. I get the SC one that I got to live when the underdogs were, it was 41 points, etc. But in the last decade, I mean, I get Iowa in the Rose Bowl, but like with where this team sits, if they could go get this one,
as far as like a statement.
Yeah, as a statement of like, we're back. I mean, look, we live on the West Coast, and it feels as though nobody's talking about Stanford football, right? Because I think it's because of the league they're in the ACC. Now, they go get a win at Stanford, we're talking about them again. You go get a win at Clemson, we're talking about Nerd Nation again. And, this offense and Troy Taylor and the growth that they've had in year 2. I think it's a really cool opportunity. I don't know if they'll get the win, but I will be, again, glued to this game. How does this defense show out? And how does this Stanford team navigate what will be one of the, if not the most hostile environments they'll play in all season long?
Yeah. And it's funny too, because like Clemson, like they got written off after week 1 when they got beat pretty bad by Georgia. But then you look at what they did last weekend. I mean, they were up 45-7 at halftime over NC State, not some FCS school. Yeah. NC State, like they pounded them. They ran for 269 yards on the ground, over 8 yards a carry. Stanford, they've only allowed 51 rushing yards the last 2 weeks combined. Now, granted, one of those was Cal Poly, but like, and Syracuse with that, with Kyle McCord, they're going to throw the ball a lot more than they're going to run it. But still, that's an impressive performance. Can that D stop that Clemson run game? And to your point before, Klubnik's been great this season. I mean, yeah. It'll be an interesting game for sure.
Yeah, I think, look, one thing we learned from Cal and Florida State, and I think the same is true for Stanford, Clemson, when you're on the road against a perennial power, you got to score touchdowns in the red zone. You can't be trading field goals for touchdowns. That's how it becomes 28-6,
Yeah.
right? Versus 21 all, and away we go. So, all right, Vatek, old school Big East matchup, Virginia Tech at Miami on a Friday night. That is awesome. I love that. As Miami and Mario Cristobal visit Cal next week, we'll give you a deep dive on that game. Maybe we'll even have a guest. And then the game of the week, really, in college football is Georgia and Alabama. I mean, how fun is this for Kalen DeBoer? He's got this team rolling. Nick Sheridan is the coordinator. It's so fun to watch them spin it all over the yard like they did at UW. And then here comes Georgia. You reference what they did to Clemson. You got a pick on this one, Jim? Where are you leaning?
I'm already just laughing at the narratives right now. Already, like, if Georgia wins this game, people will already be out on Kalen DeBoer. It's like, really, like, come on. But I think it's going to get a lot of attention. Both for this game will get a lot of attention both on and off the field. We won't go there with this one, but it'll be interesting to see how Kalen's team does, because this is going to be one of the best games in college football this whole season, most likely.
Yeah, I can't wait for this one. I know this. Regardless of outcome for Alabama, to the Bama fans that might be listening now, Kalen DeBoer and his staff won't flinch, and they'll come right back to work next week and put it on whoever's next on their schedule. Like, they have an operation, and he is so skilled at running that operation in one of the most professional ways I have ever seen. So I'm looking forward to this one just as a fan of the game. I'm also looking forward to hanging out with Ashley Adamson. I'll be in the studio all weekend. Haven't been in a studio on a Saturday since 2020. So I'm just going to be sitting there all day, like, just jacked. Like, what am I going to do? The first game's at 9 a.m. and the last game is at 10 p.m. Central Time, which is 8 p.m. Pacific in Oregon. I think they have us slated for like 2:30 a.m. We might get out of there in Chicago. So keep it locked on Instagram. We'll try to have some fun throughout the day. Yeah, buckle up, Indy. I love that phrase, buckle up. Make sure you're buckled up when you're driving around wherever you may be driving, because here comes our conversation with Bill Riley. This section is fueled by our founding partner, 76. They keep you in the know as you are on the go, go, go. And it's been such a joy to be all over Salt Lake City over the last 12, 13 years. And it's been such an honor to get to know Bill Riley. He is the expert of experts when it comes to the Utah Utes. We know you Utah fans, you've waited long enough to get to this interview. Hopefully you didn't fast forward or put us on double speed, but here it is. Bill Riley, our conversation today, presented by our founding partner, 76. And with that, here we go. The not one, not two, the three-time Utah Sportscaster of the Year. And now, I want to make sure I get the title right. The Utah Athletics Director of Broadcasting, Bill Riley, good friend. We've been on your show many times. Now you get to come on this one with Y Option. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us here in week 5.
Yogi, I'm happy to do it. You came on my radio show so many times. I feel like I owe you about 1 million of these, so I'm happy to do it. Good to see you.
It is great to see you. What is it like to be you now in this new role? You're still calling games on the weekends, of course, as the voice of the Utes, but the day-to-day radio show is no longer that. You got a day-to-day job. Give us an update on your life.
Well, I had a really good 30-year run in sports talk radio. So I figured I'd step out on a high note, knowing how mercurial our business can be. And really what happened was with Utah moving to the Big 12 Conference, the Big 12 doesn't have a network like the Pac-12 network was, like the Big 10 network, things like that. So what they have is every school has an ESPN Plus digital platform. So it houses a ton of the broadcasts that would have aired, say, on a Pac-12 network or something else. And Utah didn't have a position, and they were kind of creating this out of nothing. And I've had such a great relationship here for so many years with the University of Utah folks in my role. I always said I was kind of a member of the extended family, and they approached me with this, and I applied for the position, and it was just a really, really good fit. There are not many jobs I would have left the job I had for, because I love talking on the radio every day. But this is fun because I still get to do the games, the football, the basketball, and I get to do some more games on ESPN Plus, soccer, some other things. But this is allowing me to help kind of create something that doesn't exist. A broadcast platform, a broadcast department, working with a lot of good folks that are already here in this department, joining their team. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of challenges. It's a new world for me, kind of like this is for you, but it's a lot of fun and I'm having a blast.
I like it. You're channeling the inner Michael Molinari, a listener of this, as you know well, now running things, the Pac-12 Enterprises. But you're giving back. That's what I hear when you say that. Like, you're giving back. You're trying to create something in a new frontier for this university, especially in athletics. Do you feel that? And what is that like? Because you used to feel like, I'm sure, fans saying thank you. We love your commentary. Like, there was a dance there. There was a relationship there.
Yeah.
What is that like now in a pseudo executive role as you're growing something from the ground up?
It's unique, that's for sure. And it's one of those things where when you haven't done it before, I mean, I've done a lot of these things in my career. I've worked in TV, I've worked in radio, and I'm kind of putting them together. But we're creating, I've never created a digital platform, a streaming platform before that all these university events are going to be aired on. So it's a little bit of trial and error. I'm not going to say I'm perfect in it, but we're finding our way through it. We launched this thing about a month and a half ago, and it's been great. And the other fun part for me is this broadcast department that we're helping to grow. At some point in time, it's going to be not just athletics, but it's going to be integrated with the university. And I teach a class on campus here, an intro to sports media class. And I'm going to be lucky enough to work with the university and the communications department here to create kind of a broadcast curriculum. And then as this broadcast curriculum gets created, we can use a lot of the students that are in those disciplines, bring them within this broadcast department we're creating, and get them real world experience while they're still here on campus. So I had a great experience when I was at the University of Kansas. I had so many great professors and got to do so many things that I've wanted to do this for a long time. And so I've taught the class for a couple of years now, and now I get to integrate that with the job I'm doing. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think there's something as we all grow older of like giving back. I always tell students, I'm like, hey, email somebody that's an alum. I promise they'll get back to you, because as you get older, you just want to give some sort of your expertise or knowledge or whatever back to others. So you referenced Kansas of the Big 12. Now it's Utah of the Big 12. Big win in their first game in the Big 12 at Oklahoma State a week ago. A dominant win, I think, different than what the score showcased. Of course, Isaac Wilson, right? You were there. You were front row seat, as always, on the 50-yard line, calling it with Scott Mitchell. And I got Arizona coming to town. What can you tell us about this team that's picked to win the league? Clearly concerned with not only Cam Rising missing last week, but also other key players. Like, where do they sit in what would have been one of the top games in the Pac-12 a year ago, and is billed, I think, as one of the top games in the Big 12 right now?
Well, I think last week answered some questions, Joe. Cam Rising tried to go in pregame. He wasn't quite ready. So you started true freshman on the road. No offense to Utah State, but that atmosphere last week and the team they were playing was really, really good. They were missing Karenni Reed. They were missing Connor O'Toole. They had a couple of guys step up at those positions as well. Van Fillinger's having a career year on the defensive line. But I think more than anything, what Utah did last week is what you saw for 13 years in the Pac-12. Kyle Whittingham went back to basics, and he just said, we're going to punch you in the mouth. We think we're more physical than you are. And to your point, the final score wasn't indicative of really how the game went. They were up 22-3 with about 5 minutes to play. They bullied Oklahoma State around for about 55 minutes of that game in 140-degree heat on that turf. Utah got back to what its roots were. They knew they weren't 100%. They leaned on their physicality. They leaned on a running game, and that's another guy that's really emerged. Mekhi Bernard, who's been kind of I won't say a part-time back, but he's not been that lead running back one per se. Well, he carried it 25 times for 182 yards. Both were career highs. Again, against a good Oklahoma State team that was ranked 14th on the road in 140-degree heat on the turf. So I think Utah learned about their toughness, their depth, but when they want to be physical, and you know this, you've seen it for years in the Pac-12, when they want to be physical, they got back to some of that physicality last week.
Yeah, Mekhi Bernard, absolute stud, a great first name. Shout out to our youngest son. But in addition, he's also that dude, Y option, one of the players of the week a week ago. What have you noticed about Isaac Wilson? We had him at the Elite 11. It's not like there isn't competition there. Last time I saw you was the spring game, called that one when he played in that ball game. He has, I'm sure, a way about him that you're watching evolve, right? Utah State, to your point, is different than Oklahoma State. Now here comes Arizona. If he's to start again this weekend, he'll have 2 under his belt at least against a team that is coming off a bye week, coming off a really tough loss. What have you learned about him that maybe you didn't know in the beginning of training camp?
That the stage isn't too big for him. Now he's going to make mistakes like any quarterback who's 18 years old and hasn't played a ton. But he grew. He played a little bit against Southern Utah in the first week, played the second half against Baylor when Rising got hurt, started and played 4 quarters against Utah State and played all 4 on the road at Boone Pickens last week in Stillwater. The kid's growing. And he's got a confidence about him. We talked about that a lot with Cam Rising, that confidence and that swagger. You've been around and coached quarterbacks for a long time. Those guys that have it, teammates follow. Well, he's a freshman. So it's not like teammates are going to jump in and follow him immediately. You've got to kind of prove yourself a little bit, and he has. Toughness, sticking his nose in there, 48-yard run, threading that ball down to Brant Keithy for the long touchdown. He's made a few mistakes like all freshmen are going to do, but he's learned from those mistakes. And then he's come back and played. And what I've seen is a little bit of growth every game and every quarter out of him. But I'm also seeing his teammates begin to buy into him a little bit. So whether it's 1 more week as a starter or a couple of more weeks as a starter, whatever it might happen to be, Isaac's confidence and experience is growing. But the teammates now see it too. Because, when you step in that huddle, you want to believe in the guy that's calling that play and believe that he knows what he's going to do. Well, he's figuring out the language of Andy Ludwig's offense, which is a tad complicated for a young player. And I think he's getting his teammates, they've really begun to buy in on him.
Yeah, I can remember talking to him in the spring, and he was like, I'm just in the hip pocket of Cam. And I was like, what an experience, right? I don't think we'll ever see another 7th-year player in college football at quarterback. And he is just seemingly in his hip pocket. Even the decisions that he's making, the discernment at the position is really impressive. So let's flip it to this week. Yep. You know Brent Brennan well. You know this team well. Last year, I called this game. Of course, Cam Rising was kind of like the pseudo assistant quarterback coach on the sideline in Tucson, and Utah gets drilled. Now we have a new head coach, similar cast of players that were making plays a year ago in that ball game. But I got to imagine that's a tough taste to navigate and deal with if you're Utah. What do you anticipate fan base on Saturday and game when you look at these two teams facing each other in weirdly the Big 12 play?
Well, I went back and I watched some of the game the other night just for reference sake, and you and Ted Robinson called that game in Tucson last year. And I know you remember the last 37 seconds of that game.
Sure.
And I can tell you there's nobody in the Eccles football building that's forgotten the last 37 seconds of that game either. It was Arizona beat them up and down the field. Utah was shorthanded. And Arizona beat them. But that the end of that game, I think, stuck with some of the guys. Now, I know the guy that threw the pass isn't there anymore. And the coach that was high-fiving and saluting the quarterback that threw the pass coming off the field isn't there anymore either. But the guy that caught it was, and a lot of the guys that were dancing and prancing and talking last year were. So I know that stuck a little bit with the guys here, but it's a different year. Utah's not worried about getting vengeance for what happened a year ago. They're worried about beating a good team on Saturday night here, because if they win this game, Yogi, they are now 5-0 to start the season. They've navigated then arguably their most difficult stretch of the season, at least to this point on paper, going to Oklahoma State and coming home with Arizona. And you've beaten a really good Noah Fafita and Tetero McMillan as well. So, yeah, last year, I don't think the guys that were on the sideline have necessarily forgotten it, but you've called night games here before. It's going to be the first really good night game. Utah didn't play many night games a year ago. It's an 8:15 kickoff. It's what they call a dark mode game, so it's going to be kind of a blackout of the stadium. And there's a lot of energy in Rice-Eccles Stadium. And I think Arizona is going to get Utah's best shot coming up on Saturday night.
Yeah, I tell you what, I called the game when Arizona went to Utah with Ted 2 years ago. And late in the game, go back and watch that final 2 minutes or so, and it's Noah Fafita throws a touchdown to the left to Tetairoa McMillan.
Yeah.
And you just kind of saw, like, I wonder if these guys will be the future. Now they come into this environment coming off a bye week. I expect them to be much improved from where they were the last time they played. But you're right, that the evenings in Salt Lake City can swallow you. And we all know Morgan Scalley, and we all know the last 37 seconds, to your point. I got a feeling it's going to feel like ASU top 20 matchup. You remember Jaden Daniels years ago? And Arizona's going to have to navigate that early on, which leads to my next question. How good is this defense? Like, is this 2018, 2019 defense? Is this Julian Blackman, Johnson, Jalen Johnson and company? Like, where do you think this side of the ball is when healthy, notably with a couple guys out a week ago?
It's not quite there yet. They had a lot of seniors on that football team, the Blackmans and the Johnsons that you referenced. There's a couple on this team this year, but they've got impact guys. Up front, they're deep. Fillinger, as I mentioned earlier, is having a great year. Logan Fano's back, Connor O'Toole, Lander Barton's healthy. They have missed Karenni Reed a little bit, but in typical Kyle Whittingham fashion, he has found a safety and moved him to linebacker. And he kind of gives you Devin Lloyd vibes a little bit. That's Jonnu Hall, who wears number 3. The question I had about the team coming in this year was the back end. They had to replace Bishop and Vaki. They had to bring in a corner from Georgia Tech, Kenan Johnson. Well, the secondary has been terrific. The safety play with Gilman, the transfer from Stanford, and Teo Johnson have been fantastic. Kenan Johnson went down in the first game with a season-ending injury. Well, Scooby Davis, who's been in the program for a couple of years, steps up. Cam Calhoun, the Michigan transfer, who was a true freshman on that national championship team, he's come in. He's already got a pick this year, and then Zamiah Vaughn's there. So the area of the defense, I've never really worried much about the front seven because Utah at worst is good, and at best they're really good. But the back end's been terrific. Now, this will be the best test of the year this weekend. Oklahoma State can throw it a little bit. They got Bowman uncomfortable last week, but Fafita and McMillan are a step up in competition, and that offense is good. So they'll be tested. But I think right now, Yogi, I'd say this defense is very good.
Okay, so let's talk about one more player on this team because it's a huge story this week around the transfer portal and players sitting out or opting out. Dorian Singer's had a very interesting dance in his college career, right? Walked on, under-recruited because of COVID, balls out at Arizona, transfers to SC, doesn't live up to those expectations, which can be a challenge. And I know we both have a ton of empathy for that. And now he's at Utah, facing his initial school in college football. How has he been in the transition in your eyes? And what do you anticipate from him, regardless of quarterback, come Saturday night?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I got a chance earlier this week to talk to him on the coaches show. And he's such a nice kid. So, well-spoken, soft-spoken, just very laid back. And I asked him a little bit about it. He was not recruited out of high school. He walked on at Arizona. He wanted a chance to play D1 football. So he walked on. He earned that scholarship, and he probably would have stayed had it not been for the coaching change, and what went on there. So he goes to SC, and he kind of got caught up in numbers last year. I don't think it was any knock on Dorian Singer. SC just had a loaded wide receiver room. And I asked him, I said, so why Utah? And he said, I just liked their culture. I just liked what they were about. And I felt like I could fit in here. And he has. He's already got 17 catches on the year. And I'll be honest, Yogi, and you've seen him play at Arizona. He's a receiver that can do anything. He can run any routes you want him to. He can get over the top if you need him to. He's got great hands. Everybody saw the helmet catch that he had last week against Oklahoma State. But I really do believe he gives Utah their best wide receiver one that they've had maybe since Darren Carrington was here. And then when you place him alongside guys like Micah Pittman and Money Parks and Brant Keithy and that loaded tight end room that they've got, heck, guys like Damian Alford, who was the number one receiver at Syracuse a year ago, hasn't even really gotten involved in the offense yet. But Dorian just he gives, whether it's Isaac Wilson or Cam Rising, that true wide receiver one. And I think he really likes being part of this group here in Salt Lake City.
Okay, so this entire thing that you're describing just mirrors, of course, who Kyle Whittingham is, whether it's next man up, the culture of competition, and the culture of being tough and resilient. You're 20 for him. Where's your vibe? Like, here we go. We've seen glimpses of the next couple years at quarterback in
Yeah.
Isaac Wilson. We know how talented this team is. I feel like every year it's like, yeah, this is probably going to be it. But then there's just something that lowers you right back in, and it might be the shining star that Isaac Wilson may be, or the returning roster that, as you referenced, they're not all seniors. Any feel on Coach Witt here in another conference that he's got a chance to go win?
I think he's enjoying the ride. And people ask me that all the time, and Kyle and I have joked about it. He's always told me, Billy, I'm not going to be a lifer. Not like my dad, not like Lavelle. I'm not going to be a lifer. But he's got a program, Yogi, that is it's a well-oiled machine. Uh, five of his assistants have been with him 10 years or more. Everybody else has been there anywhere from about 4 to 10 years there too. The locker room takes care of itself. They don't have bad eggs. He's not dealing with scandals and controversies. Now he's dealing with every other coach deals with these days, transfer portal and NIL, but that's the way of the world. I really do believe that he's taking it year by year. I think that as long as he's got a chance to win a league and be competitive and he feels like he's in the mix, I think he'll seriously consider it because he loves coaching. And I asked him, he goes, hey, I've got a great group of coaches. I got a great group of kids. So, but to answer your question directly, he's given me no hint or indication that he's ready to step aside yet.
Yeah, I got a feeling, I've often called Utah a biker gang. Like they roll into your town, do whatever they want. They'll leave it a mess and leave however they'd like they did a week ago against OK State. I got a feeling he's just going to ride out, and we'll just see the back of that Harley whenever he chooses to do it, and that will be it. So one more Utah question, and then I got a big picture of college football for you. What is it like in the Big 12? And I say that I work in the Big 10 now, and calling games for the Big 10 Network. We're doing this thing here at Y Option, which is college football through the lens of the West Coast. It feels nationally like there are these two heavyweight leagues, which I think it's fair to assume that there are. Then you've got a really talented league in the Big 12 that, from my eyes, looks like the Pac-12 of years past, where everybody around the country probably doesn't realize how good everybody is, and they might beat each other up, and who knows who will be left standing. But I wonder, do you feel like the league that Utah's in now is not garnering a lot of respect because it feels like the champion will get in, but that's it? And that's just like a prevailing thought. And you're living it every day. I'm kind of curious what that experience is like for you.
Well, it's been good for Utah so far because they've kind of stepped in, by some accounts as kind of the golden child this year, picked to win the league. They've come off, back-to-back conference championships 2 years ago and things like that. I think the one thing that the Big 12 doesn't have that the SEC and Big 10 have are they don't have a blue blood, if that makes sense. There's not a collegiate, and they have, the SEC and the Big 10 have a bunch of them. The Big 12 really doesn't. The two blue bloods that conference have moved on to the SEC now. But what they have is a lot of really good programs. I mean, we won't even talk about basketball. It's the best basketball conference by far. But from a football standpoint, it's what I said for a lot of years about the Pac-12. If you stay up late and watch it, it's one of the most entertaining, fun, and competitive leagues you're going to find. And I find the Big 12 to be the same thing. Now, Utah's only played the one true conference game. They did play Baylor. But I grew up in the old Big 8. I grew up and I went to the University of Kansas. I grew up in Kansas City. So I know a lot of the kind of core schools in this league. People don't talk a lot about Iowa State. Iowa State's good. Matt Campbell can coach. They bring a toughness like Utah does. TC was in the national championship game 2 years ago. Obviously, they're down a little bit and took a beating last week. But, I'm just saying West Virginia oftentimes gets overlooked just a little bit too. Kenny Dillingham's building something at ASU. Right now, there's not a blue blood. There's not that one great historical football program. And I think a lot of times networks and fans and the national media like to turn to that. But you've seen it, and I know that, the Big 12 is going to get a chance to see it. Utah and BYU, the quote-unquote holy war, they're going to match up, and it may become quickly the best rivalry in the new Big 12 conference. So I think this league is really good. It's really solid. It's really competitive. I just think the one thing it lacks, if you're looking at it from a national perspective, is just that quote unquote blue blood program.
Yeah, and it's a great perspective. And I think the blue blood line is also relatively lazy from a fan perspective because you look at what Utah's done. That's why I hope they win the league and play in Arizona in the champ game or a BYU in a rematch and then go make some noise in the playoff because I think they're worthy of being in the conversation of being a blue blood just based on how they've won. I get they haven't done it for 50 years in a specific league or 100 years, but that to me is that's old news. Like college football is in the immediate dramatically different than it was 3 years ago, let alone
Well,
today.
and then you got a program like K-State too.
That's right.
When I grew up, Kansas and K-State were the laughing stock of college football. People don't talk about it enough nationally, but the job that Bill Snyder did for 25 years, 30 years at Kansas State to turn them from what they were into a program now, and I think they hired a really good coach too, Yogi. I think Chris Kleiman, I mean, obviously he can coach. He won 4 national championships at the 1AA level, but he's a guy that fits their culture very, very well. That's another program that, really has emerged in the last 25 years or so because it was built on the back of a guy named Bill Snyder.
Yeah, I started my broadcasting career calling K-State games, and I still can see the bowl of Werther's Originals. Me and Sam Ponder and Steve Fiziak would be in there, and he'd offer us one quietly, so gently, and then I'd watch practice on a Friday. They'd be in full pads, and I'm like, hey, there's nothing quiet and gentle about this program. So let's talk about one more program.
Sure.
The Pac-12. The Pac-12 has come to life, right? And Utah State, as recently as, was it yesterday morning or this morning? I don't remember. It's all happening kind of in a blur, but they joined the Pac-12 conference now in this rebuild mode. I'm curious, 2 things. One, what can you share with our listeners and viewers about Utah State and this program moving forward into this league? And then 2, what do you think Utah's lens is on the Pac-12 and what seemingly will be one of, if not the best, group of 5 conference, and we know that school, whoever wins that championship, will get an automatic bid into the CFP. And is there a world where at least you maybe went back and thought, oh, Utah, I wonder if there's another move here in the next couple of years?
With Utah, no. I think financially I'll be very curious to see what that league looks like. I think it's great. I think just keeping the Pac-12 name alive is fantastic. It's going to be somewhere between a Power 4 league and a Group of 5 league. It's somewhere in between there. It's not going to be your typical Group of 5, but I think it was not quite a Power 4 league. As far as Utah State goes, it's been one of those programs that traditionally through the years has just kind of been up and down and up and down. When Gary Anderson left Utah to be the head coach up there, he really revitalized that program, and then he took off for Wisconsin. Then they hired a guy named Matt Wells, and Matt Wells did a fantastic job there as well. And he ended up leaving for Texas Tech. And the last couple of years, they've been battling a little bit of turmoil up there on and off the field. A guy named Nate Dreiling is their interim head coach right now, and he's, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago before Utah played them, and he's a football guy and trying to do his best. It's a tough tag to have interim head coach, and with a lot of things that are going on. But for the Aggies, I'm happy for them because it's a really good fan base. It's a loyal, hardcore fan base, and I'm happy for them to be able to get into that league. I'm very curious to see what that final iteration of the Pac-12 looks like. Is there going to be another school? What's it look like when all the dust settles here with the stuff off the field? But I'm happy for Utah State, and I hope it stabilizes just a little bit, and I hope the league is able to find some good footing and, as you said, establish itself as kind of that maybe something a little bit better than a Group of 5 league.
Yeah, well, I love always the thoughtfulness. You've always had it from the moment we met 12, 13 years ago, and I look forward to seeing you sometime soon. I think it's going to have to be at like a CFP game. So Utah handle business. I'll make sure I'm tracking it, and maybe we see a Big 12 champ against a Big 10 champ, who knows, in the playoff. We can hang out together and do another one of these catch-up sessions, man.
I'd love it. And I'm just so happy for you and for Ashley and for the entire crew and guys like Guy Haberman and your boy Jim and, and some Mike Yams doing some good stuff now too. I just, we had such a fun time and a great run, People have asked me all the time, Big 12 people are like, is Utah happy to be in the Big 12? It felt like they were trying to, I said, well, yeah, they're happy to be in the Big 12, but don't you want somebody who fights for their league and tries to keep it alive? And wouldn't you want somebody on your side that was doing their best to save something? That's what Utah was doing. Mark Harlan and the administration, the leadership, President Randall. But there just came a time where it wasn't feasible. So Utah's more than happy to be in the Big 12. But I can tell you from my standpoint and the universities and also the fans, they love their time at the Pac-12. So we'll miss that, but we had a lot of great memories, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And I think the best part in every interview I get asked, just like you do, it's always goes back to the people, right?
Yeah.
We may have crossed paths at some point, but because of the Pac-12 and the growth of that league, it became, a conduit for you and I becoming fast friends. And really one of the greatest joys that I've had in my life, I've said it many times, is really connecting to your community as a broadcaster, as a human, as a dad, as a husband. Like I've had so many beautiful memories talking to fans, being on campus, going on a variety of the shows in your city. And Utah's always got a special place. I look forward. I know it'll happen. At some point, I'm going to call another game in Rice-Eccles, and I can't wait to give you a big hug up in the press box, brother. So thanks again for coming on Y Option.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it. There he is, the professor, Bill Riley. It's the afterglow. That's right. It's that time where Jim Thornby and I just check in and recap the interview. What did we learn? What do we wish that we asked? Of course, every interview here at Y Option is presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know as you are on the go, go, go. And it was really cool to catch up with the professor, the director of broadcasting, a 3-time Sportscaster of the Year in the state of Utah, our good friend, Bill Riley. Jim, you got to know Bill really well over the years. I'd imagine you've listened to his show, but maybe not been on a show where he is the guest. What were your thoughts today with him coming on?
Well, it's funny. It immediately brought me back to, I guess it was the 22 season when Utah found their way back into the Pac-12 championship game, and I remember him either called me or texted me during his post-game show when they were like the late game that night. Cause I was, this was late in the season. There was probably 2 or 3 weeks left. And he was like, hey, do we still have a chance? Does Utah still have a chance of making the championship game? And I was like, yeah. I'm like, it's not likely, but like X, Y, Z all have to happen. And then I'm like, you know what? Those aren't necessarily the craziest things that happen. So then I immediately then once I told him, I think I texted Jordy Lindley, the SID there at Utah. I was like, hey, by the way, like you guys are still alive. I just kind of redid the math here. And then she told Kyle, and he even was like kind of couldn't believe that they were still in the mix for that thing. And then sure enough, they went to the game. And then won the game and on to the Rose Bowl. So it's funny that'll always be kind of like one of my lasting memories of doing stuff with Bill throughout the years. And just what a great dude Bill is.
I love it. What a great dude you are. You're just giving people hope left and right. That's awesome.
And who knows? I mean, it's always the weirdest situations that wind up playing out in those tiebreakers. And that, I mean, I've said it before, that will be one of the biggest stories in college football come November. No one's talking about it right now, but as these conferences have gotten bigger and bigger, and once these tiebreakers start to come into play, I mean, you've seen my documents that I've done the last 3 years of trying to like make it all through. It's the biggest headache in the world. You're so paranoid that you're going to screw something up, and then everyone, the world will just be like so mad at you, even though all you're doing is math. I mean, I am by no means determining who is playing in these games. All I'm doing is math. So I'm glad not to be doing that math this November.
Good. Well, you could just host those podcasts. We have a tiebreaker podcast. I'm just going to bow out. I'll listen to it on a run or something like that, or on the Peloton, and you just take over the mic, bro. Go to town, do whatever your heart desires. Okay, that is it in advance of week 5. Keep it locked on all of our social channels. Jim does a phenomenal job all weekend long. News may break. Who knows? Does the Pac-12 get to the 8th team? Is it UNLV? What's going on at UNLV at the quarterback position? We've talked more about UNLV today than I probably ever have other than when Marcus Arroyo was named head coach, because I'm such a fan of who that man is. Arizona State, by the way, on a bye this week. He's the offensive coordinator there, if you weren't aware of that. I'm going to head to the studio, going to watch the games all day long, kind of have that experience. So stay connected to us. We appreciate and love being connected to you. If you want some swag like Jim's hat, go ahead at yoption.com. Thank you to a couple of you favorite friends of ours that have just recently purchased some gear. It's been fun to see that popping off the shelves. And we'll be back. We'll be back on Sunday with our newsletter from 30,000 feet, flying back early morning from Chicago. I will probably talk a little bit about flag football because I'm the new head coach of the Mara Vista Lions. Shout out to Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe we'll even get them on throughout this season. So there it is, week 5. Thank you for supporting us wherever you do. We're on YouTube, of course, Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most recently, Pac-12 Insider on their FAST channel. If you have a smart TV, check us out there. Jim, appreciate you, man. Lots of love. Peace.
Let's go.